PFT PM Posse, which is always at the top of the stack because I follow that account. PFT PM Posse asks, will we see teams not caring about tampering with coaches if it only involves trading draft spots like Philly and Arizona? I think that will make people more concerned about tampering because teams regard their unused draft picks as the most important capital that they have. It's cheap, and it potentially puts them in position, if they choose wisely and develop properly, they can get a Hall of Fame player. So they don't want to lose draft picks. They don't want their pick in round 3 to be a lot lower than it was supposed to be. I think this could be the thing that maybe gets teams scared straight. Now, the problem is, and we saw it when Jim Irsay believed, based upon some articles from ESPN.com, that the Commanders had called Andrew Luck or reached out to him through an intermediary or whatever to see if he was interested in playing for the team in 2022. Irsay shouts via Twitter that any contact with Andrew Luck would be a blatant violation of the tampering rules. I think this weird precedent the NFL created with the Jonathan Gannon tampering situation, the NFL has quickly said, no, this isn't what we're going to do on a regular basis. We're not going to deal with these tampering violations in a way where the two sides work it out, where there's some sort of swap made of draft picks. I think the NFL just doesn't want this to be an issue on a regular basis. Tampering happens every once in a while, every 5 or 6 years. The NFL has some other agenda for making an example of someone who tampers. Remember, the last big tampering penalty was the Chiefs for talking directly to Jeremy Maclin during the 48 hours when they were allowed to talk to his agent, but they weren't supposed to talk to him. They talked to him, and they whacked the Chiefs. They took away a third-round pick, I believe. And I was told at the time the reason that the league did that is there were a lot of young coaches that they wanted to basically scare into not violating the tampering rules so blatantly. The tampering rules will continue to get violated blatantly. And I still believe, and this is what got Howie Roseman to put me among the top 5 NFL conspiracy theorists, pressing him on exactly what happened with Jonathan Gannon, because I believe that something big happened. I believe that, and this is just a hypothesis, it doesn't even count as a conspiracy theory, and it's just a way to try to understand why this came to be. Because I don't buy the idea that the Cardinals had some sort of moment of clarity where they decided, you know what, we called Jonathan Gannon when we shouldn't have. We probably should turn ourselves in, even though no one will ever find out and no one will ever know. And people do this all the time. We probably should tell the league and the Eagles that we called Jonathan Gannon when we shouldn't have. We kind of feel bad about it. We're dead. Bullcrap. I think the Eagles became aware of it. Now, how did they find out about it? Well, if the Eagles were in the process of trying to figure out what happened to cause them to blow a 10-point lead in the second half of the Super Bowl, and they looked under every stone possible, did they look at Jonathan Gannon's email account? Did they look at his phone that they issued to him? Did they look at his computer that was issued to him? Did they come to the conclusion that in the 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, this guy was spending some time putting his plan together for his interview with the Cardinals that was happening the day after the Super Bowl? Pretty big 2 days in Jonathan Gannon's life. Pretty significant and impactful 2-day period. And frankly, the second day, the interview with the Cardinals, to him, more important than the day before. And if there was any evidence that the Eagles found that suggested that second day took precedence over the first day, and that his preparation of the Eagles defense was undermined or diluted in any way because of that, it's a reason to get upset. So the Eagles say something to the league. The league realizes, you know what, once they see the evidence from the Eagles, we can't ignore this one, because if we do, then the Eagles will leak that to someone else, and the world will find out what a big deal it was. So we better do something. Let's work something out here, because we don't want this getting out. This one's big. We don't want it getting out. So let's work this deal out. Let's announce it 5 minutes before the draft starts, so maybe no one will be paying attention. And let's just keep our mouths shut and our heads low. And if anyone asks any tough questions, let's engage in an ad hominem attack where we accuse them of being conspiracy theorists, and no one will ever know how bad it really was, because it was probably pretty bad. I think it was pretty bad. And I hope one of these days we find out the truth. Maybe there'll be a deathbed confession from Howie Roseman or Michael Bidwell or Monty Ossenfort or Jeffrey Lurie or someone. Maybe someone eventually will tell us what really did happen, because I have a feeling it was pretty bad. Joshua, a.k.a. at Josh Dimes. with all the discrepancies you've recently been reporting on with the NFL's gambling policy, why don't you think the Lions or the NFLPA aren't appealing Jameson Williams' 6-game suspension, especially if it's true the bet was placed at a hotel during an away game? Well, if that is true, and I've seen that reported by someone, I can't remember who, that would fall within the confines of a violation of the gambling policy. Because under the policy, if you're traveling with the team, if you're at the team hotel, you can't wager on any sports whatsoever. If you're home, you can. If you're at work, you can't. For players. For non-players, you can't bet on anything at any time as it relates to sporting events. Players can do it at home. They can't do it when they're at work. But there's a deeper issue here. Because the question is, why didn't the Lions or the union appeal? Well, first of all, the Lions have no standing to appeal. The Lions have no direct dog in that hunt. They have to stand back and let it all play out, just as if it were a PED suspension, personal conduct policy suspension, or a substance abuse policy suspension. The team never has the right to appeal. It's always the player with the assistance of the union. The NFLPA would appeal if Jameson Williams appealed, but I've heard, and I haven't written this yet, and I need to. It's a good reminder. Hopefully I'll remember this reminder and write something about it. I've heard that what happens is, and this doesn't surprise me, the league basically approaches the player and says, we have evidence you violated the gambling policy, accept a 6-game suspension. And if we have to take this to a formal process, there's a chance it's going to be a longer suspension. There's a chance it's going to be a full year. So you should take the 6-game suspension. So, and I'm not saying this specifically happened with Jameson Williams, but I've heard this has happened with others who wagered on sports other than football when they shouldn't have. The idea is you have an ultimatum. You take the 6-game suspension quietly, and if you fight, we're going to reserve the right to try to make it a more significant suspension. So they get a plea bargain out of the player. So there's never an appeal. The player agrees to the 6-game suspension, never gets the evidence, never gets the proof, never has the NFL lay out the case. Now, presumably the player knows I did something I shouldn't have done, but we never really find out how deep that rabbit hole goes. And there's never an opportunity to raise what I think would be a very important defense. You failed to properly educate me on the minefield, on how to get through the minefield. Oh yes, you've harvested my signature on this document, but you never actually told me. And your policy doesn't make it as clear as it needs to be. You'd never get to that point if the player just accepts the 6-game suspension for fear of having a more significant suspension if he fights. Now, we've kind of come to this loose understanding that if you bet on pro football, NFL football, you get suspended at least a year. If you bet on some other sport while at work, you get 6 games. That's kind of what's played out. But the problem is the policy is written so broadly, and it flows from the commissioner's power to preserve the integrity of the game. And it's all unilateral. It's not negotiated with the union. This gambling policy was created simply by the NFL. The union just steps back and takes it. Now, the player has rights, but what are the rights? And if you're some player in the future who decides to fight it because you gambled on something at work other than NFL football, and you want to say, hey, the precedent is 6 games, policy is broad enough that the commissioner can say, well, your case is different because of this, full season. You fought it full season. So the leverage that comes from that threat that maybe will sit you out for the full year, that's what's getting guys like Jameson Williams. And again, I don't know specifically that he agreed to this, but I think usually what happens is when they announce it, it's done, it's over. There's either an agreement or the process is fully concluded itself. I think with these guys that were all announced in April, they all took their medicine in lieu of going through a full fight because we never heard anything about appeals, about hearings, about evidence being produced. They just caved. They caved in the face of the threats that the NFL made that if you don't take the deal that we're going to put on the table, it's only going to be worse. Matt Bostic, Nick Bosa likely to have a new deal with the 49ers in the offseason and likely to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. Do you think Justin Jefferson and other skill positions will use it as a baseline for future deals? I think that the reality is it's position by position. That Justin Jefferson's goal will be, and he should be, the highest paid receiver in the NFL, not the highest paid non-quarterback. It just so happens that pass rusher is the most important position other than quarterback. So the highest paid pass rusher is most likely to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And when you look at where that market is, it's pretty close right now. And I know Tyreek Hill is technically at the top with 30 million, but there's a bullcrap final year that drives that number up above 27 million or so. I think 27, 28 is still the sweet spot, I think, for both positions. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's kind of what it is for pass rusher and receiver. Upper 20s, close to 30 as what I feel. Oh, well, Aaron Donald's north of 30 as interior defensive lineman, but he's a unicorn. Doesn't matter what position he is. He's one of the great players of all time. He's north of 30. I think for Bosa, Aaron Donald should be the target. And for Justin Jefferson, I think Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill should be the target, and maybe just try to get to 30. And again, this is why we always largely ignore the initial reports that are leaked by the agents to the people who are trying to get it all out there 5 minutes before the announcement, because it's always favorable to the player. The truth comes out within sometimes 24, sometimes 48 hours later, and we always break it down at PFT and say, here's what it really is. So yeah, they'll say it's 27, but it's really 24. Or they'll say it's 30, it's really 27. So we'll see. But Jefferson has earned his deal. Bosa is overdue for his deal. I expect both to get contracts before the season begins, maybe before training camp begins, and get the financial reward that they have richly earned. Let's see what else we have here. Ryan Nizet, will Saudi Arabia or Saudi affiliates eventually try to purchase an NFL team? I don't know that they will. What I wrote in the aftermath of this PGA Live Golf merger that may or may not be derailed by the federal government because they're looking at antitrust implications and other potential irregularities. If the Saudi Public Investment Fund decides they want in on the NFL, there's a dollar value that will get the NFL to play along. There's an amount that will get the league to change its rule. Rules are made to be changed or disregarded on a case-by-case basis. If the Public Investment Fund is going to pay some ungodly amount of money for a team and also pay some sort of a fee, they'll come up with a fancy name for it, a waiver fee. That's not that fancy, but it sounds good, a waiver fee. We're going to pay you $500 million per team to look the other way on this rule, to waive, to make a one-time special exception to your rule against foreign investment in teams. We'll pay every team $500 million, and then we'll buy this team for $13 billion. Now, you're getting to a $30 billion investment, but if you want in, and they got the money, if they really want in, they'll be able to do it. So that's the point that I made in the aftermath of the Gulf merger. If the Saudi Public Investment Fund wants to do it, they will find a way to get it done, because everyone has their price. And there'll be a certain amount of money that will get a guy like Jay Monahan to completely undercut everything he said about Live Golf. There's a certain amount of money that will get you to make a business decision that goes completely against any and all principles you may have previously articulated. Matt in St. Pete, does the NFL's gambling policy apply to daily fantasy sites regardless of the dollar value? DraftKings and FanDuel each have free week contests that require zero money. There's something floating around in the gambling policy. I don't have it in front of me. There's a $250 limit for fantasy prizes year long. I think daily fantasy is prohibited. But look, the easier rule for players would be just don't do any of it. No free contests, no paid contests, no daily fantasy, no full season fantasy, nothing. Complete and total clarity. Don't enter the minefield. That's so much easier than, I think I can do this. I'm not sure if I can do that. You know what? I'm just going to assume I can do it because hell, the NFL is making all this money off of sports books. I'll be fine. It's far better for all players and for the league if the rule is stay away. But to go back to the Chris Sims conspiracy theory, sports books don't want them to stay away because they're a nice source of some significant revenue. Luca Gomez, you often say that in Buffalo, if they don't get over the hump soon, either the front office or the coaching staff will get replaced due to either lack of talent or utilization of it. Which do you think gets dumped first in this event, the front office or the coaching staff? Well, Sims and I will debate this from time to time. He's a firm believer that the talent isn't where it needs to be in Buffalo, so that would point to the front office. Now, when you look at the issues that Stephon Diggs is unhappy about, that would point to coaching. And one of the problems of having a defensive head coach is you have Brian Daboll there getting the most out of Josh Allen as offensive coordinator, and he does so well, he becomes a head coach. You got to find another offensive coordinator. And at a minimum, there's an adjustment period for a guy like Ken Dorsey. Last year wasn't great. Apparently, Diggs was unhappy about the offense. So is it enough to just say, we've got this great franchise quarterback in Josh Allen, we need an offensive head coach? I don't know. Is it enough to say, you know what, coaching is fine, we need a better GM to get better talent around Josh Allen, to make better decisions about how we're going to build this roster? I don't know, but I do know this. As the pressure mounts on the Bills, and this Diggs situation, I think, increases the pressure, it's critical that Brandon Beane, the GM, and Sean McDermott, the head coach, be on the same page and not try to blame each other. It's tough to do. Easy to say, tough to do, because they're both feeling the pressure. So if they're concerned that they're going to be out if things don't work out this year, the human reaction to that is, it's not my fault, it's his fault. So you get in a situation where Beane would blame McDermott, McDermott would blame Beane, and it just becomes toxic. They need to be joined at the hip. It needs to be the old three-legged race. I think I use that metaphor in Playmakers, that the GM and the coach need to be fully aligned, and they need to think, we either both stay or we both go. And look, if this year ends up being a disaster for the Bills, let's say they don't make the playoffs, and that's not as crazy as it sounds, because the Dolphins are better. The schedule for that division is difficult, very difficult. They play 8 of their games against the AFC West teams and the NFC East teams. They play 6 games against the other teams in the division. That's 14 games right there. It's entirely possible only one team's getting out of that division and getting a spot in the postseason, which would obviously be the winner of the division. If only one team gets out and the Dolphins win that division and the Bills don't make the playoffs, I think it's reset button time. And I know that coaching staff gets a little antsy when I say or write those things. Front office gets a little antsy when I say or write those things. But that's the way this industry that you've chosen operates. Every year, there will be a certain number of coaches and general managers who are deemed by the owners of those teams to not be fit to continue in those jobs. We're not rooting for it. We're not carelessly suggesting it. We're just acknowledging the reality that when we get to the Monday after week 18, if not sooner, changes are going to be made. Where are the hot spots? Where are the places where we think a change could be made? Well, in Buffalo, where they've chronically failed to live up to high expectations and they've failed to get the most out of the team around Josh Allen. And when you throw in this Stephon Diggs situation, it makes it a spot that you at least keep an eye on. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I just said, oh, everything's fine, everything's great. They get to the playoffs every year. Oh, they went 20 years without getting to the playoffs. They're getting to the playoffs every year. They should be happy. And maybe they are. Maybe just good enough is just good enough, like it seems to be in Minnesota at times. I don't know. But the reality is, for the teams that are determined, when we got this franchise quarterback and we've got to at least get to a Super Bowl with him, if not win a Super Bowl with him, it creates a sense of urgency, like it did in Denver. When John Fox took the Broncos to the Super Bowl, 2013, 2014, hosted the Colts in the divisional round. The Broncos lost, and Fox was out. And Gary Kubiak was in, and they won the Super Bowl the next year. So that's the precedent that's out there that these owners are considering. And the Bills are in a unique posture where they've got one of the best quarterbacks in football. They haven't been to the Super Bowl with him, while Joe Burrow has been there once, and Patrick Mahomes has been there 3 times. Burn unit. Some, such as Chris Sims, hate the hip drop tackle. What should be the proper technique to tackle from behind while stopping the ball carrier's momentum? Look, that's not for me to figure out. I don't know. I do know this, though. They haven't changed it. They haven't taken that out because they don't have an alternative. If they had an alternative, that would be the way to tackle a guy from behind, not this hip drop mechanism that is dangerous, that causes injuries to the lower extremities, but that has not been removed from the game yet by the NFL. And this is the challenge. We've seen an evolution of the game over the past 30, 40 years where it's gotten safer, it's gotten safer, it's gotten safer. And the challenge is to stop short of making changes that would be so dramatic that it would fundamentally alter the nature of the game. And this is one that until they have an alternative, it can't go anywhere. And look, I know the NFL has made rule changes in recent years, listening to players who said, hey, you shouldn't care only about our brains. You should care about our ACLs and our ankles and our legs too. And the NFL has made changes aimed at making the game safer from the neck down. The NFL's primary concern is the neck up. That's where the serious injuries could happen with, look at what concussions did back in the early days of the concussion crisis, where kids were being less involved in youth football. And if you would have a serious neck injury and or death due to a kickoff return, the supply of future football players could dry up dramatically. But my point is this, to answer the question: if there was an alternative, that would be the rule. For now, they don't have an alternative, so the hip drop remains. I probably should wrap this up. It's been 50 minutes so far. I never expected to. I say this all the time. For those of you who have been around this facility over the course of the last several years, first of all, thank you. And second of all, you know that I inevitably say, boy, this is going on longer than I thought it was going to. I'm looking to see what else we have here. It's something we haven't gotten to yet. Here's one. What can be done to make the rookie wage scale fair to running backs, perhaps early player options? I mean, one idea I've heard and I've seen is 3 years to free agency. No franchise tag. 3 years, and then you hit the market. Now, that would require an alteration of the collective bargaining agreement specific to the running back position. And that's why there's value in this idea of creating a separate bargaining unit within the union for running backs, where they have their own voice, because there is conflict among the various positions. And the running backs have gotten screwed by the current rookie wage process because they put in their best years early in their careers when they're not making much money, and then they get to free agency. The franchise tag holds the best of the best running backs in place at a lower number than what they should get for the franchise tag, and they're just stuck, like Saquon Barkley and like Josh Jacobs this year. So it's a situation that requires a fundamental look at what we can do to be more fair to the running backs. And to get to that point, before it can even happen, the union has to want to do something about it, and the league has to want to do something about it. And I think the easiest solution is what Chris Sims suggested several months ago on PFT Live: some sort of a league-wide fund that rewards the players as they go for being the guys who generate all those yards, score those touchdowns, become the fantasy football darlings. Let's supplement their salaries early in their careers when they're making the league minimum. Let's pay them then. Let's give them a reward then, not from anything that touches the salary cap, just a league-wide incentive pool, because it's good for everyone. It's good for the game to have great players and great performances. So let's pay those guys then. Let's not force them to wait and wait and wait. And then when they finally are in position to get paid, nobody wants them anymore because they've got an accumulation of injuries and they're older, and there's some younger, cheaper guy that they can just lather, rinse, repeat, and make him the star player, and then not pay him when he's in position to finally get paid. What else do we have? Neil watches PFT, wants to know if PFT PM will be making a return in any regular capacity other than the hiatus. Probably not, except for when there are significant developments that will require me to do a PFT PM after we go off the air. And there haven't been many of those lately. This really has been a slow and quiet year. I look back over past years, there's always some story that becomes the gift that keeps on giving. We had Deshaun Watson for 2 years. We've had Tom Brady's comings and goings, Aaron Rodgers, Deflategate, Bountygate, this scandal, that scandal, CBA negotiations. There's always been something that compels regular monitoring of what's happening in the NFL. It's really not there this year. So there haven't been a lot of reasons to have special editions of PFT PM, but that's how it's going to go forward. Anytime after 9 a.m. Eastern, when PFT Live goes off the air, if something big happens, we'll do an episode of PFT PM. And from time to time, it's a vehicle for doing interviews. If the interviews land in a window that doesn't mesh with the live show, we'll do a PFT PM interview. All right. Some of these questions I've already addressed one way or the other. John Ardell, why are you on in the AM with PM in the title? Well, by the time you get this, and by the time I finish, it will be PM. The idea is it's the vestige of when it was an afternoon show. So PFT PM, even if it tapes in the morning, it shows up in the afternoon. Here's an interesting one. And hey, I'm never going to turn down an opportunity to sell a couple of copies of Father of Mine, which for some reason has spiked in sales. I'd like to think that it's maybe positive word of mouth and people are reading it and they're enjoying it and they're telling a friend about it. And more and more people are buying it, but I have no idea how that happens or why it happens. But I'm appreciative that people are discovering it, they're buying it, they're reading it. And really, I am so used to getting negative feedback on everything I do that I expected a bunch of negative feedback about Father of Mine, my mob novel set back in 1973, inspired by the true events of the crew that my dad was associated with. Although he was just a bookie, he wasn't one of the soldiers. He wasn't, button man or anything like that. But the feedback I've gotten on that has been overwhelmingly, if not universally positive. And I know by saying that, I'm opening myself up now to getting some emails telling me how much it sucks. But the reviews dating back to the Kirkus review that came out in early April was positive. The reader reviews have been, for the most part, extremely positive. The emails I get are universally positive. And, I like writing fiction and longer form, 100,000 words, 70,000 word books, because I've developed this routine where every day, I'm writing. And what I write today by tomorrow doesn't mean anything. What I write tomorrow by the next day doesn't mean anything. It's just gone. There's no longevity to it. There's not even a 24-hour shelf life. Like, rarely, if ever, is there something I write that ends up resonating for a week. Never happens, rarely happens. So with Playmakers, that was something that maybe will have some relevance for a year or two, better than a day or two. But with fiction, that's something that can live forever. That's something that somebody can discover 50 years from now. I like that. I'm reading a book now that the author is deceased and his words live on. I like that. I like having something that becomes part of your legacy. And my goal is, and so the question again, has Father of Mine exceeded your expectations? I really didn't have any expectations because I just decided I'm going to put it out there and we're going to sell as many as we can. And I'm surprised, especially recently, with the number that have sold. It is cheap. It's hard to sell something like this to a football crowd because it's not a football book and people just don't read like they used to. What I'm trying to do is help people have an experience that I thoroughly enjoy. I love having a good book that I'm reading. I love having that thing that I know I'm going to carve out 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, to come back to this story, this creation in your mind of a world to go along with the words, because your imagination becomes activated by this story you're being told. You give into the suspension of disbelief and actually tell yourself this is something that really happened. These are real people. And it's just fun. Now, if it's not a good book, it's not fun. So my goal is to write things that actually will be regarded by most people as good and something that's engaging and something that whisks you away from your day-to-day life. I mean, that's kind of the mechanism that we've provided on ProFootballTalk.com, PFT Live here on PFT PM. People appreciate a break from the monotony, the adversity, whatever it is of day-to-day life, especially in recent years. And we're happy to give that with Father of Mine and with the 7 others that are coming. In some form or fashion, they're coming. And I got some stuff happening behind the scenes that it's not worth talking about it now, but there's some stuff that's going to be happening, I believe. And there's others like Father of Mine that are going to come to fruition. They're going to be available at least one a year, maybe more often than that. But this is something that I've embraced as kind of a late career hobby that, hell, I don't know. I want to write 20, 25, 30 of these. The idea is eventually one of them will be pretty good. And then if one of them ends up being pretty good, just by accident, maybe people discover the other ones and they're out there. They're there forever. Once it's out there, once it's done, it's there for whoever wants it. So sorry about babbling on about that, but it's something I've enjoyed doing. And it's a different way to connect with folks out there. And if you haven't read Father of Mine yet, it's $4.99 for the ebook at Amazon, $13.97 for the printed copy. Those have been selling in significant amounts in recent days and weeks. And again, what's $13.97? I mean, come on, what do you do? You drop that on your breakfast at Starbucks between the egg and whatever sandwich and the coffee and whatever else you end up getting on the way out the door, newspaper. $13.97 is nothing. You get a good book that you enjoy. It carries you away to a different world. If you do it just right, it lasts for, some people have been reading this thing in one sitting, and that's great. I love when I hear that, but I prefer having a book that will be around for a couple of weeks. And I know I've got that little refuge, that little oasis in your day-to-day life that you can go to at the end of the day. You can go to for a break on your lunch hour, whatever the case may be. So that's what we're trying to do. And I appreciate those of you who have bought it, who have read it, and who have expressed appreciation via email, florio@profootballtalk.com. If you want to tell me you like it, if you want to tell me you don't, whatever you want to do, you can reach me there at any time. That's it for today. A full hour. Wow. We're out of the gates during the PFT Live hiatus with a bang. Likely back tomorrow with another edition of PFT PM. Until then, check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Thanks as always for some of your time, and we'll see you real soon. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.